To start doing our first DBQ on the spread of Islam together, I just want to make sure that you know a few things. So the first step is to make sure that you know your rubric. Memorize that there are 7 points that a DBQ is graded out of. The first is your contextualization and your thesis point, which go in your introduction, where you kind of like give the background of what led up to the topic of your essay, and then your thesis is based on the prompt and how you're going to explain your answer to that. It's your claim of what your answer to that prompt is. In your body paragraphs, you're going to basically put the next 4 points in there and possibly 5 points, because remember, this is not an ELA essay that you are going to typically write that sounds very eloquent and that is proofread. This is going to be done under a time crunch of 60 minutes, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a conclusion. It can if you have time, and you can put your complexity point there if you want to, but you have to have these other very strategically placed points in there for historical analysis. So each DBQ is going to give you 7 documents, in which to earn 1 point, you have to use 3 documents and explain the meaning of them, and then to get 2 points for document usage or for evidence, you do 1 more document, so 4 total, and you make sure that the documents that you explain, you also explain how it supports your thesis and the claim that you are using to answer the prompt that's been given. In addition to using evidence from the documents, you also have to provide outside information that doesn't come from the documents, that shows you know something else about the topic not included in the documents. And you also have to source those documents. You have to do this for 2 documents by using our HAPPY method. Either give historical context, point of view, purpose, or audience, or a combination of those to show that you really understand the source and maybe how it's biased or how it fits into history, and are very have a complex understanding of that. For the complexity point, my 2 favorite ways of doing this are to create a connection called a synthesis across time and space. Maybe whatever the topic is of your DBQ reminds you of another time period in history, and you would explain that connection or something similar that happened. The other way to do it is to source all 4 documents that you're using to be evidence for backing up your thesis. I think those are the 2 easiest ways. So since we're going to be doing a spread of Islam DBQ for our first one, you're going to notice here that on the DBQ prompt page, it actually gives you kind of like a bulleted list of the DBQ rubric points here, with 2 points being for document evidence. In the prompt, you really want to make sure that you, as your second step in what to do on a DBQ after you memorize the rubric, is translate this prompt so you know how to attack it. Translate it into a question that starts with how much, because when it asks you evaluate the extent to which something happens, it means how much was it? So how much was conquest a cause of the spread of Islam between the 8th and 14th centuries, so the 700s to the 1300s. And you usually want to write out those hundreds so that you know you're in the right time period. And you always want to figure out what's the historical thinking skill. If something brings about something else, it's a cause. Maybe it's an effect kind of essay. Maybe it's a change or continuity essay. Or maybe it's a similarity or difference essay. So keep in mind they're going to ask you a question only from those options. This is a cause kind of essay. How much was conquest a cause of the spread of Islam? So that's the question that it's asking, and that's the answer that you have to come up with to create your claim. Your documents are going to be what guides you to that answer. Because maybe you're thinking, yeah, it partly was military conquest that caused that, from what I know from my notes. And that's good. So then your third step is going to do a little mini brainstorm. What else do I know about this topic? Oh, I remember doing notes on the Golden Age of Islam. That was called the Pax Islamica. They created the astrolabe, and they had Tao ships. Like, whatever pops into your mind about the topic of the spread of Islam, maybe it's more about the religious aspect of Islam. That is something that you can jot down, because maybe you'll be able to use that later. After you take a look at the prompt, your third step is to do that brainstorm, and then go ahead, step 4, and start looking at the documents. For each of the documents, you are going to follow the same thought process, and that is basically figure out the basic meaning of the document, what's being shown in the picture, the map, the chart, or maybe in the quotation or information that's given to you. Maybe think of some sourcing ideas. Maybe think of how you could group this into maybe creating body paragraphs to prove a claim to address the prompt. And then what other outside information or vocabulary do I know that kind of relates to this topic? So for example, for document 1, this is not giving conquest vibes. This is giving trade vibes, which also can spread religion through cultural diffusion. So that's really, based on what it says here and what it shows here, the basic meaning of document 1, that Mecca is a center of trade, and it also was the holiest site in Islam, and that's what you would explain about the document. For sourcing, you would either need to give some historical context about what Hajj is, maybe that it's part of the 5 pillars of faith, or something, that sets it in history or geographically. Maybe from a Muslim point of view, one of the most important things to do in life is to go on your pilgrimage. And you can think about what you know from our study of Islam and give that historical context or the point of view of why Mecca is so important from a Muslim point of view. I don't think that this really would be a document I would use as evidence to prove that conquest was a cause of the spread of Islam. I would say that it's more trade. So you can have a thesis that is somewhat based on conquest if some of the documents show that, or maybe there's other factors, and that's the information that they're providing to you in these documents. So you come up with what those other factors are, and you could possibly create this group of, oh, maybe there's going to be other documents that show that trade and economic factors are something that also spread Islam. Maybe it might be religious, maybe it's political. And then for outside information, use the document as a springboard for what else do I know that's kind of outside of the box, or that's kind of like a tangent. Oh, I know that Jerusalem is also a holy site for other monotheistic religions like Judaism and Christianity, and those are Abrahamic religions. So if I use that as a sentence, that could get me like a little bit of an OI sprinkle, where I would have to give those kind of little sprinkles of facts that are not in the document throughout my essay to add up to that point on the rubric for doing outside information. You're going to go on repeat and do this same process for all of the documents, knowing that when you actually do this on your AP exam, you're not going to have what you see here under each document, but this is the thought process that you want to follow to set you up to use your documents properly in your essay. I hope that helps. Part 2 coming tomorrow.